Hey everyone, I'm Vladimir Jutip. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these screens behind me. Let me tell you what's going on here. These are feeds coming into all of our CBS News stations around the country, all of our stations, all of our affiliates. If there's news happening in any part of the country where we have coverage, we're going to bring it to you right here on CBS News 24/7. So here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you right now. A series of deadly explosions rocked Lebanon this morning. Details on what Israel claims was a precise airstrike targeting a building near the parliament in Beirut. Newly unsealed filings by special counsel Jack Smith say former President Donald Trump, quote, resorted to crimes to stay in office after losing the 2020 election. How the former president is responding. And President Biden visits the Carolinas, surveying the destruction left behind by Hurricane Helene. The death toll from the storm now topping 180, nearly a week after it made landfall. This is CBS News 24/7. President Biden says he would not support retaliatory Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. The remarks come as the Middle East waits to see how Israel will respond to Tuesday's massive missile attack. Meanwhile, Israeli forces are continuing their offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon and against Hamas in Gaza. So for more on developments out of the region, I want to bring in CBS News reporter Haley Ott. Haley, what are you hearing about the latest with regards to Israel's moves over the next couple of hours?
Good morning, Vlad. Well, Israel's continued its operations in Lebanon. The IDF said that it struck 200 Hezbollah targets overnight, and there was a major strike on a building near central Beirut. Now, you'll recall that most of the Israeli strikes in the Beirut area have been on a suburb that's been a Hezbollah stronghold. This strike was right near the city center. It hit a multi-story building. 9 people were killed. And in the south of the country, the fighting has continued as well. There's close combat between Israeli troops and Hezbollah fighters. Yesterday, Israel announced its first casualties in this operation. It said 8 IDF soldiers had been killed. And today, Israel has warned more communities in southern Lebanon to evacuate for safety. That could be an indication that it's planning to expand its operations there. Now, in Gaza, the strikes have continued as well. There have been multiple over the last hours. And over the last 48 hours, dozens of Palestinians there have been killed.
As you know, Haley, it's Rosh Hashanah today. What is the feeling on the ground? Are there celebrations getting underway to mark the new year?
Yes, it's Rosh Hashanah. It's the Jewish New Year. It's one of the most significant holidays in the Jewish calendar. And usually what people would be doing would be gathering with family, having a big meal, celebrating, relaxing. And the mood is very different today. People are still off. It's a holiday. They're still gathering with their families, but there isn't a lot of celebrating going on. We spent time with one family cooking and preparing yesterday, and they told me that as this holiday approaches, they're really just hoping for a better year next year.
And are there fears among the families of the hostages being held in Gaza that we're getting just further away from getting their loved ones home, getting a ceasefire in place or some kind of cessation in the hostilities as we approach the 1-year anniversary of that horrific October 7th day?
The short answer is yes. Lebanon seems to be escalating. There's expectations that Israel will retaliate for Iran's missile barrage earlier this week. So the conflict seems to be moving further and further away from the concerns of these families of the hostages, which is to come up with some sort of ceasefire deal that would see their family members released. They feel betrayed by their government, sometimes silenced, sometimes pushed aside. So they're hoping that as this new year comes, that they're able to arrange something to see their loved ones brought home.
All right, Haley Ott reporting for us from Tel Aviv this morning. Haley, thank you very much. All right, now to some startling new details about former President Donald Trump's alleged criminal scheme to stay in power after losing the 2020 election, and some new reporting on what he might do if he loses again in November. In a court filing unsealed yesterday, special counsel Jack Smith argued the former president, quote, resorted to crimes as he sought to remain in power. And He outlines why the case should go forward despite the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity. Federal trial attorney Robin Nunn joins us now to talk about this. So Robin, I think that one of the things that was interesting about the unsealed documents yesterday is for a lot of people who cover politics and even folks who are just trying to make up their mind about this election, there's a sense that, oh, yeah, we knew this already. We know that the former president tried to subvert democracy back in 2020 on January the 6th. We knew some of the things that he said, the tweet that he posted that put the vice president, Mike Pence's life in danger. But it feels like when you see them all listed like this, the question becomes from a legal standpoint, does the special counsel, has he met the criteria to prosecute the president? Folks know this, and folks are going to have to make up their mind on how they choose to vote in November. But for the special counsel, legally speaking, does that meet the bar?
Yeah, I think this was a very interesting brief. To your point, I'm not sure that there were entirely surprises that came forth, but it is a very lengthy 165-page document, many of which are things that we already knew about. And I don't think a lot of us expected to see this sort of private criminal scheme coming back into emphasis last night. The Supreme Court obviously recently proclaimed that official acts are out of bound, that the president is immune. So much like police officers who are immune for certain acts, if they make a mistake on the job, the Supreme Court found that presidents also hold this sort of immunity. But Jack Smith and the government have not given up, and they have set forth what I would consider a pretty lengthy and detailed brief detailing exactly what issues they believe are not presidential acts, that are not official, and therefore there are things that he could be held criminally liable for in their opinion.
So Robin, is something as simple, I mean, one of the things that is in these documents, Jack Smith alleges that the former president told advisors before the 2020 election that he would simply declare victory before all the votes were counted, telling his children it doesn't matter if you win or you lose, or if you won or if you lost. That in of itself, could that be considered a crime?
That is what the government is arguing here. They're arguing that, the Supreme Court has obviously decided that official acts are out of bounds, but the things which you just described are not official acts. They're not Article 2 acts that under the Constitution would be considered protected. Going after Pence, going after encouraging people to riot, conversations on the plane about how we're just going to keep going and, take this election are things that are not official acts. And the government is encouraging Judge Chutkan, the judge in Washington, D.C., who released this filing last night and made parts of it public, that she's going to have the really difficult job of trying to decide which actions by Donald Trump were presidential and which ones were personal. And the problem for Donald Trump is the line between public service and self-service, is going to be tough to draw.
All right, Robin Nunn, always great to have you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Okay, President Joe Biden is going to be touring the damage in Florida and in Georgia today. Vice President Kamala Harris was there yesterday while Biden got a scope of the devastation over in the Carolinas from Hurricane Helene. The president has ordered 1,000 U.S. troops to help those impacted in North Carolina, and many residents are still without running water. They don't have food and other basic necessities. Parts of highways, folks, completely wiped out. Roads impassable. The federal government says it plans to cover 100% of the cost to remove that debris and to also pay for the emergency response materials over the next 6 months. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry has been in Asheville, North Carolina since the very beginning of the devastation, following also now the rebuilding as slow as it is. Skylar, tell us about the president's visit to the state yesterday and what's next.
Yeah, hey, Vlad. Well, the president had an opportunity to meet with some of the local officials here in town, as well as elsewhere in the region, and really sort of get a sense of what exactly happened following Helene. And that's everything from flood damage to search and rescues to trying to restore particular services in and of itself. Where we are right now, this is actually the first time we're getting a look at this particular area. This is also part of that Biltmore Village, one of the more popular historic parts of the Asheville area right here. The city of Raleigh bringing their high water rescue team. You can see some of their crews right here. And this main area completely covered with water, so much so that you can see this building damage right here and really sort of get a sense in the scope of how much devastation is left behind here because of Helene. As you pointed out, the president said that he will be calling on 1,000 active duty troops to help reinforce the North Carolina National Guard through this process. We have seen all sorts of deliveries by air, search and rescues by air, water rescues. And that has been something that we have seen over the course of the last several days, because keep this in mind, Vlad. Remember, this storm happened on Friday. There are still people that these people are trying to get access to, still trying to reach them. And I think that when you present a set of challenges there, the tough roadways to try to travel on, the lack of power, lack of water, lack of food, it really is a desperate situation here. And so we know that crews have been working around the clock. FEMA is here. And really, it is an all-hands-on-deck sort of thing as they work to try to not only recover, but save as many people as possible.
So where will those additional U.S. troops go, and how long will they be there to help the response effort?
Well, the president says that not only are they going to be footing the bill for the recovery process in terms of clearing the roadways, but these troops will be on hand for at least the next several months. We know that they will be in some of the more harder to reach areas nearby Madison, which is seeing just as bad of a devastation, if you will. And also those mountain communities, right, where, you know, traditional vehicles can't make their ways up those roadways. And so we're going to see military resources brought to those areas as well. Those communities that, if they weren't washed away, are absolutely suffering just because they are cut off from the community. We should also point out here that cell phone service has improved tremendously in Asheville itself. On Friday, it completely went away. Now, the bars, at least for our phones here, are relatively strong. Officials have said that we anticipate that, especially as the Starlink satellite systems start to be deployed in and around the region as well. I will say that we stumbled on a charging station where a lot of people were getting their Wi-Fi, getting their power just to try to get their phones back up and running, because they realized that they want to make sure that they keep everything strong, because service is still spotty. But as for today, things appear to be a little bit better than they were over the course of the last 6 days.
All right, Skylar Henry, there in Asheville, North Carolina, where he has been over the course of the last several days reporting on the devastation. Skylar, thank you very much.
You bet.
All right, over to Europe now, where Russia is making new gains in the east of Ukraine, helped by a weapon called a glide bomb. Local officials say one of those bombs hit this apartment building in the city of Kharkiv last night. They're also being used on the battlefield. Holly Williams filed this report.
Kharkiv is Ukraine's second largest city, and after recent Russian advances, the edge of the city is now only around 12 miles from the front line. This apartment building here was hit overnight, and Ukraine's rescue service says that 11 people were wounded, including a 3-year-old child. The Russians are increasingly using cheaply produced weapons known as glide bombs. They use old Soviet-era ammunition, some with over a ton of explosives, retrofitted with wings and GPS. The Russians are using glide bombs to terrorize this city, Kharkiv, as well as other parts of Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainian commander of a special forces detachment in the country's border guard told us that the Russians are learning and getting smarter. By some estimates, the Russians are gaining ground faster now than at any time since the early stages of the war back in 2022. Russia's now occupying around 20% of Ukraine, capturing Avdiivka in February, Vuhledar this week, and closing in on Pokrovsk. That's a Ukrainian logistics hub in the east of the country. Around 100,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in the invasion, according to US officials. But Vladimir Putin does not seem to mind. With a population over 3 times the size of Ukraine's, Russia's planning to draft more than 130,000 extra soldiers by January. The Ukrainians are frustrated that the U.S. still won't give them permission to use American-supplied long-range missiles known as ATACMS to hit Russian territory. The U.S. is worried that that could further escalate the conflict. But Ukraine says that those American-made ATACMS could help them counter the glide bombs and change the trajectory of this conflict. Vlad.
All right, Holly, thank you very much. All right, now time for a look at the national weather forecast. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo with the first look. Hey, Kate.
Hey, Vlad, good morning. Yeah, the best news of all is that we've got dry conditions continuing over the Carolinas. We're not expecting much in the way of rainfall, even in the coming days, which is good news because the last thing you need there while the recovery efforts continue is any more rain. Let's take a look across the country on this Thursday, and here's what we're looking at. Some pretty pleasant conditions across the Northeast. It is a bit humid across the South, but showers will stay relegated to the Gulf Coast and down into parts of Florida. Very warm for Texas and the Mid-South. It is pleasant across the Pacific Northwest, but the big story, the heat across the Southwest, where records may fall again today. We have a number of heat watches and warnings here. So again, you can see the humidity still in place for the South, 80s in Atlanta and New Orleans. But look at this, 109 degrees in Phoenix today and over 100 up toward Las Vegas, where we have heat warnings in effect. Coming up, we'll talk about some interesting things developing in the tropics as well. For now, Vlad, I'll send it back over to you.
All right, Kate, looking forward to the next report. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Vice President Kamala Harris will have a former Republican congresswoman on the campaign trail with her today in Wisconsin. We'll dive into the message she is trying to portray to voters with just a little over a month away from the election. We'll be right back. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, the former president is back on the campaign trail today in the battleground state of Michigan. It's Donald Trump's first public appearance since the special counsel investigating him for election interference released a 165-page brief outlining the case against the former president. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa is in Midland ahead of the former president's event today, and he joins me now to discuss. So, Bob, help us understand. You've got some new reporting on Trump's reaction to the special counsel filing. What have you learned?
Good to be with you, Vlad. I am here in Midland, Michigan. Former President Trump will be just down the road later today trying to rally Republicans in this battleground state to get out there and support him. He's really looking to make inroads with labor at this time, talking about economic issues, talking about border security. But it is January 6th that keeps hovering over this campaign, whether it's that vice presidential debate in the exchange between Governor Walz and Senator Vance, or this latest filing from Jack Smith. And our latest reporting at CBS News says that former President Trump is angry about Jack Smith. He believes that the Justice Department is aligned against him with Democrats to stop him from winning the White House once again. And this is fueling his grievance about the political and legal establishment and really setting the scene for a potential protracted fight post-election, especially if Trump is defeated by Vice President Harris, based on my conversations with Trump confidants.
The other thing that I think is sort of bubbling on the surface this afternoon, this morning, Robert, is Melania Trump, as you know, has a new book out. And in that book, in some of the public pronouncements that she's made, her position on abortion and a woman's right to choose seems to be different from at least the narrative that we've heard from the former president in years past, and specifically the point that they've been making on the campaign trail up until the debate that was held on CBS News between Senator Vance and Governor Walz, where they seem to sort of finally find alignment, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, on what Trump would do should he win re-election when it comes to a woman's right to choose. Help me unpack that.
Well, Vlad, it's created a bit of a stir on social media, to be sure, but talking to Republicans close to the Trump campaign, talking to Republicans here on the ground, even those who are opposed to abortion rights, they don't find the former First Lady's comments to be something that's going to change the election or change votes in any significant way, if at all. They see her as a member of the Trump family, someone who is liked and respected by many Republicans and by other Americans for being the former First Lady of the United States. But they see in Trump, Republicans say, someone who did help to overturn Roe v. Wade by nominating justices to the Supreme Court who ruled in that direction. And they see Trump despite his past support for abortion rights, despite these latest comments by the former First Lady, as someone who is in lockstep with the conservative movement for the most part when it comes to opposing any kind of comes to being supportive of restrictions on abortion rights to some extent. Now, Trump has said he supports exceptions when it comes to rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And that's Trump, I'm told, trying to take a position where he's not going to be seen as very conservative, but just conservative enough when it comes to this issue.
Got it. And finally, Bob, what's on the agenda at this appearance today in Michigan for the former president?
You're likely going to hear him talk about economic issues, but at the same time, we're really going to see if he weighs in on the Jack Smith filing and how he decides to frame these ongoing legal challenges against him.
Yeah. All right. We'll be watching. Bob Costa for us. Always great to have you, my friend. Thank you. All right. The special guests of the vice president's campaign event in Wisconsin today, Republican former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who will appear alongside Vice President Harris in a city that's home to the birthplace of the GOP. CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro is in Ripon, Wisconsin, following the vice president's campaign for us. So, Aaron, it's not surprising that Liz Cheney is appearing with the vice president. The former lawmaker has said she's voting for Vice President Harris. Even her dad, Dick Cheney, who, I mean, I don't know. You might not have been around, at least not following politics during the Dick Cheney era, Aaron. But for folks like myself who watched the sort of power that Dick Cheney amassed as a vice president under George W. Bush as president, and how conservative he was going back to the Nixon administration, it's sort of really interesting where the Cheneys are today. So I guess the question becomes, what is the message the vice president is trying to convey to her supporters by having two arch conservatives who up until recently would have been political opponents of hers?
Vlad, good to be with you outside this event in Ripon College. It's a signal and a message that the Democrats have a wide coalition. And as you mentioned, it's a bit of a striking political moment. Harris coming to the birthplace of the Republican Party, the Little White Schoolhouse here in Ripon, Wisconsin, where that party was formed. Senior campaign officials say she will address the creation of that Republican Party as she argues that Trump no longer represents traditional moderate conservatives. These are the voters she's looking to appeal to. And for the Cheneys, for the Adam Kinzingers, Republicans that have campaigned for Harris and don't really have that much in common in terms of policy, they all cite democracy and January 6th as a reason that they're here and campaigning for Harris and not voting for former President Trump.
And talk to us about the significance of the campaign's event's location, Aaron. We sort of teased it a little bit in the introduction as being the birthplace of the Grand Ole Party.
In 1854, party members from the Democratic Party, the Whig Party, came to the Little White Schoolhouse here in Ripon, Wisconsin, and created the Republican Party. And they chose this location to debut the first event, really, with Liz Cheney and Harris on the same stage. So it's a signal that they are paying attention to the roots of the Republican Party, and Harris is expected to address that during her remarks today.
All right, Aaron Navarro for us. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. The dock workers' strike has reached its third day, and its impact on ports from Boston and Houston is ramping up. Coming up, we're going to get an update on how it could impact inflation and the White House's efforts to strike a deal. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. In California, one of the doctors charged in the death of Friends star Matthew Perry has pleaded guilty to distributing ketamine to the actor. Mark Chavez is one of 5 people involved in taking advantage of Perry before his death in October of last year. The doctor admitted to distributing the ketamine to another doctor for money with the understanding it would be given to Perry. Sentencing for Chavez is scheduled for April of next year. He could face up to 10 years in prison. We now have official word on what caused the devastating Maui wildfire last year. Investigators say the fire erupted from an earlier brush fire that was sparked by downed power lines. Crews battling that earlier fire believed they had extinguished it, but hours later it was rekindled by strong winds. 102 people were killed and thousands of buildings were destroyed in the historic hometown of Lahaina. The findings from federal and Maui Fire Department investigators could help determine liability. A $4 billion settlement, is tied up in court. In an interview with CBS News Pittsburgh, Vice President Kamala Harris says she would not ban fracking in Pennsylvania if elected as president. This comes after an advertisement by the Trump campaign used her words as a senator back in 2019, where she said then that she would ban the practice. The ad claims it would cost the state 300,000 jobs. She says the ad is a mischaracterization that is intended to strike fear in people's minds. The dock workers' strike is affecting ports from Boston to Houston, and it's now entering its third day with no deal in sight. Our senior business and tech correspondent, Jolene Kent, is tracking what the strike could mean for shoppers. Jolene, good morning.
Good morning. There's been some relief on inflation over the last few months that you might already have been feeling, but now there are new concerns that this port strike could drive the prices of food, cars, and other goods back up if it continues on for weeks. We're talking about bananas, cherries, and chocolate among the first items to be affected. And Goldman Sachs says if this strike lasts more than a week, retailers that sell clothing, furniture, and home appliances could be hit as well. You could also see price increases and shortages for that really important holiday shopping season as well. Now, some big retailers have been preparing for this, and Costco, for example, said on its recent earnings call that the company pre-shipped stuff to come into the United States to get those holiday goods in ahead of this strike. But small and medium-sized businesses may not be so lucky with the resources that they have. Now, as for how far along this negotiation is going for, the union president has said he's willing to shut down the ports as long as necessary, even at the cost of the U.S. economy. The group representing the ports and ocean carriers said earlier that it increased its offer, but apparently hasn't met all the union demands, which include more money and a bigger slice of shipping company profits, as well as commitments to limit automation, as we've been reporting on, and guaranteeing jobs. Vlad?
All right, Jolene, thank you very much. Billions are on the line for the U.S. economy as pork strike negotiations stall. The White House has been nudging the International Longshoremen's Association and shipping companies to reach a deal. CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman spoke to President Joe Biden just moments ago. Willie James, what did he tell you?
Hey there, Vlad. Good to be with you. Well, the president is saying that they're potentially closer to a deal. He said, I think we're making progress when he was asked about these port strikes. Now, it's important to note that the White House is not directly involved in negotiations, but they are facilitating conversations, having those conversations with both groups, trying to urge them to come to some type of an agreement. Now, this White House has been adamant that they're not going to invoke the Taft-Hartley Act. That is something that the business leaders, others around the United States have been trying to nudge the president to do, to kind of just lay the ground here and stop this strike in the immediate term so they can work on things, but also to get those workers back to work. The president and the White House saying that he's not going to do that. They've ruled that out. But the president saying just moments ago, I think we're making progress when asked about these dock workers and the ongoing strike, Vlad.
And let me ask you about another thing, Willie James, the rising conflict in the Middle East after that Iranian ballistic missile attack on Israel. We know that the White House has told Israel that they do not support Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. What else are you hearing?
Yeah, we heard from the president moments ago, as you mentioned. We were just on the South Lawn as the president took off on Marine One. He's headed to Georgia and Florida today to see the storm damage there. And I asked him, will the United States allow Israel to retaliate against Iran? And he responded pretty quickly to my question. He said, first of all, we don't allow Israel. We advise Israel, and there is nothing that's going to happen today. That's what the president said in response to my question just moments ago. Now, it's important to point out that the United States has been trying to call about a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, a 21-day ceasefire. That so far has not happened. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been adamant that the Israelis will respond and try to protect their border. There's been skirmishes, of course, along that border between Israel and Lebanon. And the United States just trying to nudge the Israelis to de-escalate those tensions. But after that missile attack from Iran, the United States saying that there will be some type of response. But President Biden saying today that essentially nothing is going to happen today, but we anticipate we will see something in the foreseeable future. But officials here at the White House have not been willing to telegraph what that response might be, Vlad.
All right, Willie James, thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Okay, Iran's attack on Israel has New York City stepping up security. Now that we're in the middle of the high holidays, CBS News New York's Christina Fan has more on what to expect.
Good morning. City officials say New Yorkers can expect to see more NYPD officers in uniform at up to 50 key locations during the high holy days. That number, of course, includes houses of worship where canines and officers with long guns are on patrol and additional cameras have been installed. Rosh Hashanah this year comes at an uneasy time as we approach the one-year mark of October 7th and violence escalating in the Middle East after Iran fired missiles at Israel, forcing millions into bomb shelters. The NYPD says it's monitoring chatter online looking for potential threats. Mayor Adams says the city is preparing for significant protests planned for next Monday. Officials say while the city supports the rights of demonstrators to express their opinions, they will not tolerate any criminal activity, including destruction of property. From the newsroom, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
A former United States Marine accused of choking and killing a man on a New York City subway is due in court for a pretrial hearing today. Daniel Penny faces second-degree manslaughter and negligent homicide charges. Prosecutors say Penny put Jordan Neely in a chokehold back in 2023. Neely's lawyers say he struggled with mental health issues. Penny pleaded not guilty to both charges and can face up to 15 years in prison if found guilty. Meanwhile, jury deliberations are taking place today in the trial of 3 former police officers from Memphis accused in the death of Tyree Nichols. They're charged with violating Nichols' civil rights and obstructing justice through witness tampering. The prosecution argued the officers laughed after beating Nichols, thinking they could get away with it. They're also accused of not providing aid to Nichols. Defense attorneys claim Nichols was a threat to the officers. If convicted, those officers face life in federal prison. 2 other officers accepted plea deals and testified against their former colleagues. All right, let's go back to CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo with another look at the national forecast. Kate, over to you.
Good morning to you, Vlad. Well, let's start off in the Southwest, and that is where we find some very, very hot weather once again. You can see the bright shading here. What I want to pull up are daytime highs today across parts of this region. And I don't know if you can see these, but we're looking at 102 in Las Vegas, 109 in Phoenix today. It is sweltering, and we may even see some records fall across this region today. So let's talk about, first and foremost, what we're seeing as far as watches, warnings, advisories. We know this is a part of the country that is used to the heat. So when you're seeing excessive heat warnings for spots like Phoenix and Las Vegas, Lake Havasu City, down toward Yuma and San Diego, you know that this is some extreme sweltering heat, and it does not look like it's going to break anytime soon. Could even break some records today. We're looking at 107 plus in Phoenix. The record is 105. Las Vegas, forecast high of 103. The record 99. San Jose may break a record. Fresno as well. Burbank just a little bit cooler than yesterday and likely not going to break a record there. Moving on to the tropics, we have 2 active storms to tell you about. The first, Hurricane Kirk. Now, Kirk is a major Category 3 hurricane, and Kirk is expected to become a Category 4 before weakening. But the good news is Kirk is staying out to sea. It's what we call a fish storm. Doesn't look like it's going to impact any land areas, at least anytime soon. We also now have Tropical Storm Leslie. Leslie pretty much going to follow in Kirk's footsteps. Will likely become a hurricane, but will also stay out to sea. The more concerning area is this right here. Let's zoom in on this area. This is right over the Gulf of Mexico, as we know. And while there's not much happening right now beyond a few shower and thunderstorm bands, this has been highlighted as an area to watch by the National Hurricane Center. Within the next 7 days, there's a 30% chance of future tropical development. The problem with this is, of course, we just had Helene come right up through the Florida Panhandle and into the Carolinas. This area of development is notorious for sending storms right into those warm waters of the Gulf and right up into the United States. So this is one spot we will be monitoring very closely over the next week. Let's take you around the rest of the country today. And again, if you're out east, we're looking at some really beautiful weather. Feels like fall in New York City. And some of the best news of all, it looks like a stretch of dry weather as things continue to dry out and recovery efforts continue across the Carolinas. Vlad, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Kate, thanks so much. We'll check in with you a little bit later. Appreciate it. Congress was dismissed early ahead of Hurricane Helene striking the U.S., and there's no relief package in the works to help the victims. After the break, we'll discuss the growing calls for them to return to the Hill and what it could cost. We'll be right back. Well, let's get you out now to the state of Georgia, where Governor Brian Kemp is speaking on the hurricane relief efforts in his state. Let's watch.
The toll it's taken on them, on their colleagues, and on that local community. So again, I would ask all Georgians to keep these individuals and those families in your thoughts and prayers. And also, it is a reminder for us to watch out for each other from a mental health perspective. A lot of these people are working extremely long hours, putting themselves and their community ahead of their own families and their own homes that have trees laying on them. And just keep an eye on these individuals, make sure that they're getting the help that they need. And as the First Lady always reminds us, we've got the 988 hotline number and other resources available for those individuals. There was also some incredible stories of search and rescue. We heard one, I believe it was the Forestry Commission folks got to a lady that got so scared in her home during the storm, she got in her car to try to drive away from it. The road got blocked in front of her. She tried to back up. Trees started falling, blocked her in, basically trapped her in her car in the middle of her driveway. Trees completely surrounding the vehicle. She couldn't get out of the vehicle. Thankfully, none of them hit the car. But 3 days later, because the Georgia Forestry Commission and first responders were checking every home, they found her and got her out of that car and saved her life. But she'd been in there for 3 or 4 days. Those are the kind of stories that we heard when we were on the road out there. It's just amazing what our first responders were doing. There was an older lady that same type story. She was trapped in her home for several days, and we finally, or the local first responders finally got to her, literally saved her life as she was starting to run out of food or water. And then every community we went to, you just have everyday heroes that are stepping up, like the sheriff and his family in Glasscock County, the school superintendent there. They lost power to their school. Their food supply was going to go to waste. They took everything out of their freezers, got it to the sheriff, and they were literally cooking hot meals for people in their local community. We were in Johnson County and visited with a small church in Kite, Georgia.
All right, you've been listening to Governor Brian Kemp in the state of Georgia, speaking to reporters there, briefing them on recovery efforts in his state. Obviously, we know that the President of the United States is also headed to the region today. We're tracking his movements as well as all the relief efforts that are being deployed across the southeast of the country in the wake of that devastating hurricane. Meanwhile, storm relief federal funding, though, is still up in the air because of this congressional break. President Biden is signaling to Congress that they need to regroup soon. The president, as we've been reporting all morning long, has pledged to cover all debris costs, removal costs in the state of North Carolina, but it's still a very long road ahead as many remain without power and basic needs. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is live with the latest on the push to bring some members of the Hill back. So, Nicole, Congress is out all month. Any chance they'll return to take up more disaster aid to help communities hit hard by Helene? Those folks can't take a break.
Well, Vlad, there may be a lot of push, but I don't know if there will be the political pull to bring these lawmakers back, even though there are bipartisan calls for Congress to return from members themselves. Even just this week, I was with former President Trump in Wisconsin and asked him if he thinks Congress should return to pass more relief in light of Hurricane Helene. He replied yes, which is a rare moment of agreement with someone like President Biden, who has also called for Congress to return. What I can tell you is that Speaker Mike Johnson is in the region as well today. He's in the Big Bend area of Florida and Steinhatchee to tour storm damage. So this is a topic that could likely come up during that visit. He is there with other representatives from that region. But he made clear earlier this week that he believes Congress has already appropriated enough funds that FEMA can use to get that money out of the door. That was part of that continuing resolution or short-term government funding package that lawmakers passed just before the recess. But to be perfectly blunt, that was about $20 billion to replenish FEMA's disaster relief fund. So it's not necessarily earmarked for Helene per se, because this happened before the storm. But what he's arguing is that that money can still be used in its stead to respond to an emergency like that. Still, though, many lawmakers are continuing to call to come back to try to take this up in a separate supplemental package.
Got it. All right, Nicole Killian for us this morning. Nicole, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Heat wave in California, breaking records as temperatures top out over 100 degrees in the state. Coming up, we're going to take a look at what high temperatures the folks are dealing with and get one last look at the national forecast. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Got a heat wave in California smashing records, and it's expected to break even more. Temperatures topped 100 degrees throughout the state yesterday. Palm Springs hit an October record high of 117. Millions of people are under extreme heat warnings and advisories through at least today and possibly longer in desert communities near Nevada and Arizona. The high temperatures have increased concerns about wildfires in the state. All right, for many people, lingering warmer temperatures is a good thing, unless it means allergy season starting earlier and lasting longer. Some scientists say plants that release allergens have more time to grow because the first frost is being delayed. Other experts say higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere facilitate plant growth, producing even more pollen. So let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo with the last look at the national forecast. I don't know about you, Kate. I love warmer weather, so I don't care how hot it gets. I mean, even 117, I'd rather have that than freezing temperatures that we experience in the Northeast. On the other hand, I do suffer from some serious allergies. So, I don't know.
It's a trade-off. It's a trade. Yeah, I think I'd take the cold over 117, but
really?
Nobody wants the allergies, and I think I would. I mean, I like seasons.
You could just go into an air-conditioned space. I don't know. Like, I like
That's
it.
True.
I like just being outdoors, and when I have to be indoors, really, I don't know. It makes Vlad a sad boy. Vlad's sad.
We don't want Vlad to be
doesn't
a sad
like cold
boy.
weather.
No, we don't want that. We don't want that at all. And the colder it gets, though, the more it's going to kill those pollen spores and the things that make you sniffle and sneeze. So, it is a trade-off. We're never going to win completely. But if we take a look at the forecast for the next couple of days in the weekend, I would say the Northeast is kind of the big winner here because we've got a beautiful October weekend in the Northeast. But let's talk about what we're seeing across California. You mentioned it, Vlad. It's a heat wave. That is where we're kind of focused. That's really the most adverse weather we have across the country, which is some good news, at least. It is hot. It is sweltering. Now, there is the chance for a spotty shower or a thunder shower across the southeast. Shouldn't be enough to really exacerbate any of those flooding concerns. And then we've got a really great dry stretch on the way. Beautiful fall weather up across the Northeast today with highs in the 70s. But the heat, again, breaking records. Look at these temperatures. Our forecast highs today, not seeing 117. We could get there in a couple of spots, but Phoenix, 107, 108, 109 in Coachella, 103 in Las Vegas. And it does not look like it's going to break anytime soon. In fact, right into the weekend, we've got temperatures running 15, 20, 25 degrees above average, sweltering. Yeah, that's not for me. But as we head toward the East Coast, that's where we're going to get some relief for the weekend. We do have heat watches and warnings for Arizona, for portions of California, and just a stray shower or storm chance across the mountains of the Carolinas. Again, not enough to exacerbate that threat. And this front will clear things out. It looks like a beautiful weekend ahead for most of the eastern half of the country. Vlad, I'll send it back to you.
All right, well, I like that. Kate, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you tomorrow. All right, folks, at Encore of CBS Mornings coming up next. This is CBS News 24/7.